On impulse, she lied, and now she must pretend to love the millionaire she hates the most. Early May in New York still carried a bite in the air, the kind of crisp chill that clung stubbornly to the brick facades of Brooklyn brownstones. Amelia Grant sat by the window of her small apartment, hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, eyes fixed on the cream-colored invitation that had just slipped from its envelope. Elegant gold lettering curled across the page as if mocking her. Sophie Grant and Daniel Harper cordially invite you to their wedding at Sterling Vineyards, Napa Valley. The coffee was bitter, but it didn't compare to the sharp jolt in her chest. Daniel Harper, the man she had loved for 3 years in college, who told her, right before graduation, that he needed to see the world before committing to anyone. And Sophie, her younger cousin by 2 years, beautiful, wildly popular on social media, and perpetually held up as the perfect version of everything by the family. Amelia set the invitation down as though it were scorching hot. The apartment was so quiet she could hear the ticking of the wall clock and the steady, almost too loud thump of her own heartbeat. Her phone buzzed. The screen lit up. "Mom." Amelia took a deep breath and answered. "Did you get the wedding invitation yet, Amelia?" "Good morning to you too, Mom," she replied, keeping her voice even. "I still can't believe it. Sophie and Daniel. Honestly, he's such a catch. Successful, charming, and now about to marry your cousin. You're going, aren't you?" That familiar knot tightened in Amelia's stomach. Her mother's voice was bubbling with excitement, and Amelia could already predict what was coming next. "Who are you bringing? When will you settle down?" Sure enough, her mother went on, "I really hope you're not going alone. You know how the family talks." Amelia bit her lip. Logic told her to smile, say she'd be attending solo, and hang up. But pride, the same pride that had been bruised by Sophie in countless subtle ways, flared to life. "I'm not going alone," Amelia blurted. I'm bringing my boyfriend." A beat of stunned silence on the other end. "Boyfriend?" Her mother's pitch went up an octave. "You never told me. Who is he? What does he do? How long have you been together?" Amelia swallowed. Her mind scrambled for a safe, harmless name, but the one that tumbled out was Ethan Cole. It was ridiculous. Ethan Cole, the academic nemesis from her college days, the man who had argued her into corners in every single seminar, and someone she hadn't seen in over a decade. He's the CEO of a mobile app development company. "We reconnected recently," she continued, her tone dangerously confident. Her mother's delighted gasp was practically audible through the phone. Amelia could picture her beaming, mentally jotting down every detail to share with the entire extended family. When the call ended, Amelia sank into her sofa, covering her face with her hands. She had just created an absurd problem for herself. 6 weeks to either find a man willing to pretend to be Ethan Cole, a wildly successful, head-over-heels boyfriend, or invent a believable reason why he couldn't make it to the wedding. Outside, sunlight was spilling across the rooftops, but for Amelia, a dense cloud had rolled in, heralding the dramatic storm the next 6 weeks would bring. 3 days after that fateful lie, Amelia stepped into the glass and steel high-rise in Midtown, heading to meet a new client for a brand design project. Her heels clicked across the marble floor, the sound mingling with the hum of air conditioning and the distant clatter of keyboards from the reception desk. The elevator chimed, doors sliding open. Amelia stepped in, pressing the button for the 18th floor. Just before the doors closed, a familiar, deep voice called out, "Hold the door!" A strong arm caught the edge, and then he stepped inside. Ethan Cole, still tall and lean but with a more defined build, dressed in a charcoal-tailored suit that hugged broad shoulders. His brown hair was neatly swept back, a few strands catching the fluorescent light. And those cool gray eyes, the ones Amelia had once wanted to hurl a textbook at, now made her heartbeat skip. "Amelia Grant," he said, his lips curling into that half-smile she remembered all too well. "Still like to command the whole elevator, I see." She arched a brow. "Ethan Cole. Still eavesdropping like you did in college?" He chuckled, the sound low and warm, tinged with something dangerous. "Didn't need to eavesdrop. You were loud enough for the whole floor to hear. Boyfriend, CEO, sounds intriguing." Amelia stiffened. You just happened to hear. Happened to, but at just the right moment. He folded his arms, leaning casually against the elevator wall, gray eyes glinting like he'd stumbled upon his next favorite game. And I have a proposition. Not interested. You're rejecting me without hearing it? Here's the deal. I'll play Ethan Cole, the perfect CEO boyfriend at this wedding of yours, and in return, you'll be my date to a major charity gala next month. I need someone smart, sharp, and patient enough to survive a few hours with dreadfully boring investors. Amelia narrowed her eyes. Why help me? Because it sounds entertaining, he replied bluntly. And you, at the very least, won't have to endure your family's questions about your love life. The elevator doors slid open on the 18th floor, but Amelia didn't move. Ethan's offer was insane, and yet maddeningly reasonable. 6 weeks wasn't enough to find anyone better for the role, and Ethan, though she hated to admit it, ticked every box. Successful, attractive, and capable of convincing anyone he was head over heels for her. 3 days, perfect boyfriend act. Then we're done, she said cautiously. His smile widened. Deal. They stepped out, heading in opposite directions, but Amelia had the distinct feeling she'd just walked into a dangerous chess match, one in which Ethan Cole had the first move. Their official negotiation took place 2 days later, at a small cafe in West Village where Amelia often worked when she needed to escape the noise of Brooklyn. Ethan arrived early, sitting at a window table, sleeves of his crisp white shirt rolled up, an espresso placed neatly beside his phone. He smiled when Amelia walked in, but it was that signature half-smile, the kind that made her want to throw her coffee and maybe smile back at the same time. Right on time, I'm impressed, he said as she sat down. I just want to get this over with as quickly as possible, Amelia replied, setting her bag on the chair. We need ground rules. Ethan nodded, pulling out a sheet of paper and a pen, like this was a multi-million-dollar contract. I assume you have a few conditions? First, no crossing personal boundaries unless absolutely necessary to convince others. Define necessary? He tilted his head. When we're in front of my family or in situations where it's unavoidable. Also, no excessive calling or texting outside the plan. Ethan scribbled notes, nodding with exaggerated seriousness, then added, My turn. You will not bring up our college debate history in front of anyone. Amelia raised an eyebrow. Still sore about that? No. I just like to maintain my image, he said with mock solemnity. They spent nearly an hour crafting their relationship backstory. They reconnected at a tech conference, started talking, dated for a few months, then decided to take it seriously. Ethan suggested a few shared memories they could casually mention. Picnics in Central Park, Broadway shows, debates over noir films versus rom-coms. We need practice, Ethan said, setting his pen down. If people are going to believe us, we have to look at each other like the rest of the world doesn't exist. Amelia laughed. You've watched too many romantic movies. Trust me, it worked, he replied, leaning in and locking eyes with her. The cafe seemed to shrink. Amelia fought to keep her composure, but the unwavering focus in his gaze made her pulse jump. All right, she broke the moment, clearing her throat. I think that's enough for today. As they left, Ethan gave her a smile laced with challenge. Amelia knew he was enjoying this game far more than he should, and that made her both wary and intrigued. That weekend, Amelia and Ethan decided to test the act in Central Park to see if their fake relationship could pass for the real thing in public. The sun was gentle, green leaves swaying in the May breeze. Amelia wore a navy midi dress with a light cardigan. Ethan chose a white button-down and beige chinos, looking effortlessly polished yet casual. As soon as they entered the park, Ethan extended his hand. Hold hands. Couples in love don't walk with empty hands. Amelia shot him a look but slid her hand into his. It felt awkward at first, but his hand was warm and steady, making it strangely difficult to pull away. They stopped for ice cream. She chose vanilla, he went for mint chocolate chip. Ethan leaned down, pretending to steal a bite from her cup. Gotta know each other's favorites, he said with a sly grin. An elderly couple passed by, smiling at them. Amelia found herself smiling back instinctively, as if she really were happy next to her boyfriend. Crossing a grassy field, a group of kids playing soccer sent the ball rolling toward them. Before Amelia could bend down, Ethan had already picked it up and returned it to a boy with a playful remark. The sight made her feel unexpectedly closer to him, so different from the cold rival she remembered. They settled onto a wooden bench by the lake. Ethan let go of her hand but immediately slipped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer. "Practicing a bit more closeness," he explained when she shot him a wary glance. Amelia inhaled, catching the faint scent of sandalwood from his shirt. Her heartbeat quickened, but she told herself it was just part of the performance. As they left the park, Amelia noticed a few passers-by smiling at them, as if fully convinced by their love story, and strangely, that made her feel both relieved and uneasy. The rehearsal in Central Park ended, but that evening, Amelia couldn't stop replaying moments from the day. The unplanned smile when he took her hand, the way he leaned in as if her story was the most interesting thing in the world. It was getting harder to tell where fake ended and real began. 6 weeks flew by faster than she expected. Reminder texts, script calls, and quick coffee meetings to discuss details had quietly become routine. She realized she no longer felt awkward walking beside Ethan. Sometimes she even looked forward to seeing him. Then the departure day arrived. Ethan's sleek black SUV pulled up in front of her building, the trunk already cleared for her suitcase. He stepped out wearing a pale blue shirt and dark jeans, his confident smile making it seem like this was more than a mission. It was an adventure he intended to enjoy. "Ready for Napa Valley?" he asked, holding the car door open for her. Amelia took a deep breath. The next 3 days would be their greatest test yet, and she wasn't sure she was ready for everything that might happen. The early morning flight took Amelia and Ethan from New York to San Francisco, and from there, they drove through the winding roads of Napa Valley's wine country. On either side, rolling hills blanketed in lush green vines stretched like waves, dotted with olive trees and pale lavender swaying in the golden sun. The air carried the sweet scent of earth and leaves, laced with a faint hint of wine drifting from roadside cellars. Sterling Vineyards Resort came into view like a scene from a film. Mediterranean-style architecture with cream-colored walls, red-tiled roofs, and wide balconies overlooking endless grapevines. In the distance, the Mayacamas Mountains stood like a green fortress encircling the landscape. A light breeze carried the mingled aromas of oak wood and ripe grapes, leaving Amelia both awed and a little intoxicated. Ethan pulled up to the main entrance. The grand lobby opened with soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow, and marble floors reflecting each step. Amelia had barely stepped inside when she spotted Sophie and Daniel chatting with a small group of relatives. Sophie, in an ivory maxi dress, looked as though she had stepped out of a bridal magazine. Her smile was dazzling, but her gaze swept quickly from Amelia to Ethan, with a hint of quiet appraisal. Daniel, sharp in a navy suit, froze for a fraction of a second when his eyes met Amelia's, and took in Ethan's confident smile as he gave her hand a light squeeze. "Amelia, and this must be Ethan?" Sophie's voice was sweet, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of curiosity. "Pleasure to meet you," Ethan said, shaking Sophie's hand before turning to greet Daniel with the calm composure of a man used to every kind of scrutiny. He skillfully complimented the Napa scenery, asked Sophie about the wedding plans, and within minutes had the entire circle of relatives laughing. Amelia stood by, watching how naturally Ethan blended in. He listened attentively to her uncle's stories, praised the handmade wine her cousin produced, and even promised to try mixing a new cocktail with it. The way he made everyone laugh, confident yet never overbearing, left Amelia both surprised and a little proud. Daniel remained quiet for most of the exchange, but his eyes kept drifting toward Amelia. There was something in his gaze, a flicker of surprise, a trace of regret, and the unspoken acknowledgement that she was doing just fine, maybe even happier than he had ever imagined. As the receptionist led them upstairs to their room, Amelia finally exhaled. Ethan glanced at her, a sly smile tugging at his lips. "I think I just scored some major points with your family." "You do have a knack for making people like you," Amelia replied, unable to hide the warmth that had crept into her voice. After dinner with the family, Amelia slipped out onto the balcony of the main lodge, seeking a pocket of quiet. Before her stretched rows of vineyards under moonlight, clusters of lavender glistening with evening dew. She leaned against the railing, drawing in a deep breath to shed the day's tension. Hiding from the party? Ethan's voice came from behind, deep and familiar. She turned to see him leaning against the doorway, tie loosened, top buttons undone to reveal sun-bronzed skin. He stepped forward, handing her a glass of red wine. Cabernet Sauvignon, last year's harvest. Thought you'd like it. They stood side by side in silence for a while, listening to the crickets and the wind threading through the leaves. Then Ethan spoke. Earlier tonight, when your uncle brought up Sophie and those comparisons, you stayed quiet. Why? Amelia let out a small laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. Because I'm used to it. Sophie's always the benchmark and I'm just the comparison. Ethan turned toward her, his gaze steady. Don't let anyone else define your worth. Sophie may stand out in her way, but that doesn't make you any less. I've seen how you work, how you stand on your own. That's what people should admire. The words, simple but firm, tightened her throat. She turned away, pretending to study the vineyard, to hide the emotion in her eyes. You make it sound like you actually mean it. That's because I do, Ethan replied without hesitation. The space between them seemed to shrink. Amelia caught the familiar scent of sandalwood, felt the warmth radiating from him. Her heartbeat quickened, and before she could think, she heard Ethan murmur, maybe we should practice the kissing scene, just in case. She laughed to diffuse the tension. It's just practice, okay? But when his lips touched hers, it instantly went far beyond practice. The kiss wasn't hurried. It was deep, warm, and full of something they had both been trying to deny. When they finally pulled apart, Amelia realized her hand was resting against his chest, feeling the rapid beat almost in sync with her own. They stood still, breaths tinged with wine. We shouldn't let this complicate the plan, Amelia said softly, though her voice lacked conviction. Maybe the plan needs changing, Ethan replied, his gaze locked on hers. They left the balcony together, but inside Amelia, a line had been crossed. And she knew from that moment on, the boundary between fake and real had become dangerously thin. That night, lying in bed, she kept touching her lips as if the kiss had left an invisible mark. Sleep refused to come, not because of the noise from the reception below, but because every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face in that dim light, his gaze telling her things she wasn't ready to name. Her mind kept replaying the moment his lips met hers, the subtle squeeze of his hand like a promise, and the words, maybe the plan needs changing, echoing as both sweet and dangerous. The next morning, Napa sunlight streamed through the curtains, bathing the quiet room in gold. Ethan had been up early, leaving a black coffee on the table and a note. It's going to be a long day. Keep your energy up. Amelia took the coffee and stepped out onto the balcony. Below, the garden buzzed with wedding preparations, staff lining the aisle with lavender, pristine white tables set in neat rows, and the sound of a band testing their instruments drifting from the small lakeside stage. She knew today wasn't just Sophie and Daniel's wedding day. It was the day she would have to face her past, the man who once broke her heart, and the truth that her feelings for Ethan were no longer confined to an act. The Napa Valley afternoon was dressed in splendor. The lakeside garden glowed under warm golden light, rows of white chairs lined neatly, the aisles strewn with lavender petals. Beyond, lush green vineyards framed the scene, while the lake mirrored the cloudless May sky. Amelia walked into the wedding on Ethan's arm. He wore a charcoal suit with a pale blue tie, perfectly complementing her champagne-colored dress. His hand held hers lightly yet firmly, a quiet promise that he'd be there all day, no matter what unfolded. The ceremony was breathtaking. Sophie glided down the lavender path, radiant, while Daniel waited at the end, his expression raw with emotion. As they exchanged vows, Amelia felt an unexpected calm. No trace of the old ache, only a simple wish for their happiness. After the vows, as guests began moving toward the reception area, Daniel approached. Amelia, I need to talk to you. They stepped beneath the shade of an olive tree, away from the music and laughter. Daniel's gaze was steady, almost heavy. Back then, I loved you more than I could admit, but it scared me. I was afraid of commitment, afraid of losing my freedom, so I walked away. Amelia was quiet for a moment, then gave a small, genuine smile. I was hurt for a long time, but now I'm okay. I truly wish you happiness. Daniel nodded, as though a weight had been lifted. Yet the realization of what he had lost was written plainly on his face. Ethan stood a few steps away, leaning casually against a stone pillar near the aisle, pretending to watch the guests but never taking his eyes off Amelia. He had heard enough to understand her exchange with Daniel, and he saw clearly the moment she smiled and let go. It wasn't a forced or polite smile. It was light, unburdened, the smile of someone who had truly moved past the pain. And in that instant, Ethan knew every part of his original plan to help her, play the role, and then walk away no longer made sense. He thought of the kiss they'd shared the night before, of the way she'd leaned into him as they left the balcony. That feeling was nothing like acting. It was real, undeniable, and strong enough to make him certain that if he let her go, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Ethan took a step back, drawing a deep breath to steady himself before Amelia returned. But inside, a new resolve had been etched deep. He would not let Amelia become another unfinished story, the way Daniel had left her. When she walked toward him, their eyes met. Ethan smiled, but behind that smile was a silent promise. A promise Amelia, with just one look, could already feel. The lakeside glowed with the magic of hundreds of lanterns and strings of golden lights wrapped around the trees. The water shimmered with their reflection, and the smooth jazz blended with a hint of swing, as if it held the night's every breath. Amelia was at the drink table when Ethan appeared, his eyes finding her like he'd been waiting all evening. He extended his hand, tilting his head slightly. "May I have the privilege of leading you? Just this once?" She placed her hand in his, and in that instant, the world around them seemed to fade. On the wooden floor bathed in golden light, Ethan's hand rested at her waist, the other enclosing her smaller hand. Warmth flowed through their interlaced fingers, their heartbeats syncing to the music. They moved in slow, measured steps, eyes locked. Ethan's voice was low, meant only for her. "You know, all those years of competing with you, I thought I wanted to win. But I've never wanted you to lose. I just wanted to be beside you." Amelia smiled, her lips trembling yet soft. "We've always turned everything into a race. Maybe. But this time, I want to stop, because I've found something I don't want to lose." The music slowed, a violin's melody flowing straight into their hearts. Ethan leaned down, his breath brushing her cheek. "I'm not pretending anymore. I love you, Amelia, truly." Amelia drew in a deep breath, as if to keep this moment forever. "I love you too. And this time, no scripts, no roles. Just us." Their kiss in the center of the dance floor wasn't hurried, wasn't for show. It was full of truth and longing. The applause around them faded, leaving only warmth and the taste of wine on their lips. The next morning, with Napa still draped in mist, Ethan drove away from the resort. He held her hand, his gaze gentle yet resolute. "So, we're really dating now?" "Yes," Amelia replied, squeezing his hand, her lips curving upward. "And this time, no one's walking away." The drive back from Napa was quiet but warm, their hands intertwined almost the entire way. In the weeks that followed, the line between pretend and real vanished completely, replaced by small rituals, stolen kisses in crowded streets, and the kind of laughter that made the rest of the world fade away. In the days after Napa Valley, life for Amelia and Ethan returned to its usual New York rhythm. But nothing felt the same. Script calls turned into good morning texts. Quick coffee runs became evenings that stretched into night. The competition was still there. Over board games, over who could pick the better new restaurant. But it had changed. It was no longer about proving something. It was about teasing, about laughing together. A year passed, filled with weekend trips, rainy nights curled up watching movies, and endless debates about noir versus rom-com. Amelia realized that what began as a harmless lie had led her to something she never expected to find, a person who always chose to stay. When spring returned, Napa Valley sent an invitation to Sophie and Daniel's anniversary celebration. This time, Amelia smiled as she realized she would be going back, not as someone pretending, but as herself. with the man she truly loved. Amelia and Ethan's Brooklyn apartment was filled with laughter. In the mornings, they argued over who made better coffee. In the evenings, they battled over Scrabble, neither willing to concede. Light-hearted debates happened daily about who hogged more of the couch or whether noir or rom-com was the true cinematic peak. But through all the playful sparring, one thing never changed: the way Ethan looked at Amelia, as if she were the most fascinating person he'd ever met. That evening, they had just finished a homemade pasta dinner, Ethan insisting it was better than the Italian place down the street, while Amelia laughed because the sauce was just a touch too salty. As she cleared the table, Ethan slipped out to the living room, then returned with a small box in hand. He stood in front of her, his smile both mischievous and serious. "Amelia, we've competed since college, pretended to be a couple, and turned everything into a game. But there's one game I never want to end." He opened the box to reveal a simple yet elegant ring, the light glinting off its gold band. "Be my favorite rival forever?" Amelia laughed, tears already spilling down her cheeks. She nodded, her voice catching. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. No more words were needed. Amelia knew this was the one rivalry they would both win. Forever. The wedding took place on a gentle May afternoon, atop a Manhattan rooftop. From here, the entire skyline stretched before them, skyscrapers glowing in the sunset, a light breeze carrying the distant hum of the city. They had chosen an intimate ceremony, with only close family and friends. 2 neat rows of white chairs framed a simple aisle, lined with pale lavender pots, a nod to their time in Napa Valley. Amelia stepped out, her satin gown flowing effortlessly, her hair swept up to reveal eyes shimmering with joy. Ethan waited at the end of the aisle in a navy suit, his gaze at her entirely unrestrained. When the vows began, they weren't reciting tradition. They were telling their story. Ethan took her hands, his voice deep, yet his eyes bright with mischief. "Amelia, from the first moment I met you, I thought, this woman is going to drive me crazy. And you did. But you also made me laugh more, trust more, and want to compete for the rest of my life. Be my favorite rival and my lifelong teammate." Amelia laughed through tears. "Ethan, you were once the person I argued with, competed against, and occasionally wanted to throw a book at. But now, you're the person I want to wake up next to every morning, the one I want to beat, and the one I'm willing to lose to, if it means we're still on the same team. From our first debate in college to our last dance in Napa, you've been the constant challenge I never knew I needed. I promise to love you, challenge you, and cheer for you, always." Applause and laughter mingled as they kissed, Manhattan's skyline blazing behind them, bearing witness to a pact both romantic and daring. That night, they left the reception hand in hand, stepping into a waiting yellow taxi. Behind them were music and blessings. Ahead lay the city lights stretching endlessly. Ethan squeezed her hand, murmuring, "Ready for the longest competition of our lives?" She leaned into his shoulder, smiling. "Only if you're ready to lose sometimes." And so, amid the sounds of Manhattan, they began their shared life, a journey of love, arguments, challenges, and a bond that would never break. 3 years later, their Brooklyn apartment was awash in morning light. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, accompanied by the steady hum of a whisk at the counter. "You're sure you didn't put too much sugar?" Amelia asked, arms crossed, as she watched Ethan fuss over a batch of pancakes. "Trust me, this time I'm going to win," Ethan said, lifting the pan like he was performing for an audience. "Win. If the category is world's sweetest, maybe," Amelia laughed, pouring coffee into the matching mugs they'd bought in Napa Valley. They ate breakfast by the window, sunlight spilling through the glass, glinting off their wedding bands. The playful banter was still there, but between the teasing glances and mock challenges were touches and looks that said clearly, "We're teammates." As they cleared the table, Ethan wrapped his arms around Amelia from behind, murmuring, "I still won, right?" She leaned into him, smiling softly. "We both did." Outside, Manhattan stirred with traffic and the rush of the day. But in their small kitchen, time seemed to slow, leaving them to continue the longest match of their lives, one where they both knew they had and always would end up on the same team.